Friends, it's time to rewrite history according to the facts, not according to prejudices. The invaders destroyed the physical aspects of our nation, but the colonizers, they succeeded in destroying our pride with false information, and we fall for it even today. Let me show you some mind boggling facts that have stayed hidden for so long. You know, imagine the history of India is a 24-hour clock. If you open a standard history book today, it will tell you that Indian civilization began around 11:58 p.m., like just 2 minutes ago. They start the clock at the Indus Valley Civilization, Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, about 4,500 years ago. Before that, the textbooks give you blank pages. They treat the Indian subcontinent as an empty hallway, a corridor that early humans simply walked through to get to China or Australia. They told us that while Africa was evolving and Europe was developing, India was just waiting. But if you open our ancient texts, the Puranas, the Ramayana, they tell a very different story. They speak of the Treta Yuga and the Sat Yuga and happening millions of years ago. They describe a land teeming with life, gigantic beasts, and complex societies. For 2 centuries, the academic world mocked this. They said, these are just myths. Humans were primitive ape men back then. But in 2011, a scientific bombshell was dropped that shattered that arrogance. A team of Indian archaeologists, led by a brilliant professor, Shanti Pappu, dug up a site near Chennai. Over there, they didn't find pottery. They didn't find gold. You know what they found? They found technology. And when they dated this technology using the most advanced nuclear physics available, the number that came back didn't say 5,000 years. It didn't say 50,000 years. It said 1.5 million years. That is 15 lakh years. That does not make India a corridor. That is a home. That is a cradle where civilization began. Yes, you won't find this in any textbooks that we have been studying for decades. To understand the magnitude of this, we have to go to Tamil Nadu. About 60 kilometers from Chennai, there is a quiet, dusty village called Athirampakkam. Now, if you walked past it, you wouldn't notice anything. It looks like scrubland. But this patch of dirt is the ground zero of Indian prehistory. The story actually starts way back in 1863. A British geologist named Robert Bruce Foote, by the way, remember that name. He is often called the father of Indian prehistory. He was walking in this area. He happened to kick a stone. He picked it up and realized, wait a minute, nature couldn't have shaped this. A human hand must have shaped this. He found a stone tool, but back in 1863, they had no way to date it. So it remained a mystery, a curiosity. So fast forward 140 years to the 21st century. Professor Shanti Pappu and her team from the Sharma Center for Heritage Education, they decided to reopen the cold case. They went back to Athirampakkam. And they didn't just scratch the surface. They dug deep, 9 meters down into the clay and silt. What they found changed everything. They found thousands of stone tools, but not just sharp rocks. They found Acheulean's hand axes. Let me explain what an Acheulean hand axe is, because the word sounds boring, but it's actually the iPhone of the Pleistocene era. Before this, humans used simple pebbles. Smash a rock, get a sharp edge. That was easy. A monkey can do it. But an Acheulean hand axe is different. It is teardrop shaped. It is sharp on all sides. It is perfectly symmetrical. To make one, you need to hold the image of the final product in your mind before you even start hitting the stone. You know, you need abstract thought. You need planning. You need dexterity. For decades, Western scientists said humans in India didn't have this technology until 200,000 years ago. They were backward. Dr. Papu sent these soil samples to a lab in France for cosmic ray exposure dating. Now, this is again a sci fi stuff. They measure isotopes, beryllium 10 and aluminum 26. These isotopes are created when cosmic rays from outer space hit the sand. By measuring the decay, they can tell you exactly when that layer of dirt was buried and cut off from the sun. The results came back. The scientists checked them again because they couldn't believe it. 1.5 million years ago. The timeline collapsed. Suddenly, India was as old as Africa. Suddenly, the backward humans of the subcontinent were revealed to be using the most advanced technology on earth. This proves one thing: the ancestors of modern Indians didn't just arrive recently. We have been innovating on this land for over a million years. Okay, so we have a settlement in Chennai, but one village doesn't make a civilization. So, to see the scale of what was happening here, we need to travel northwest. We are going to the Indus Valley in Karnataka, to a site called Isampur. If Athirampakam was a village, Isampur was a factory. I'm not using that word lightly. This site, dated to around 1.27 million years ago, is one of the only places in the entire world where we can see a prehistoric production line frozen in time. Here is what the archaeologists found. They found a massive limestone quarry, but the distribution of rocks wasn't natural. They realized that these early humans, likely Homo erectus, I believe, they had studied the geology. They knew that the limestone slabs under the ground were better quality than the ones on the surface. So they became miners. They used levers to pry up massive limestone slabs. They broke them open to check for flaws. And then, this is the amazing part, they had designed workstations. We found piles of waste flakes, the garbage left from chipping tools, thousands of them. This couldn't be a guy making a knife because he was hungry. This was mass production. This implies a social structure. It implies mentorship, elders teaching the young how to strike the stone at the exact 45-degree angle to get that perfect flake. It tells about the Indian mind 1.4 million years ago. It was a mind capable of logistics. Friends, it was a mind capable of resource management. It was a mind capable of passing down knowledge. When we talk about Guru Shishya Parampara, we usually think of the Vedas. But I would argue that the tradition started here, in this limestone quarry in Karnataka, 1.2 million years ago. The first Veda was how to shape the stone so you can survive. Well, let's zoom out. Why does a quarry in Karnataka matter to the rest of the world? Because it changes the map of human evolution. You have heard of the out of Africa theory. Humans evolved in Africa, then moved out. For a long time, the map showed an arrow going from Africa to Europe and then maybe later to Asia. Europe was the star of the show because they found the Neanderthals there. But the evidence from Athirampakam and Isampur forces us to redraw the arrow. 1.5 million years ago, Europe was freezing. It was hostile. What was India? India was a tropical paradise. The new theory is this: India was the pivot point. When early humans left Africa, they followed the coastline. They didn't go north, they went east. They hit India. And here they stopped. India became the holding tank. The population grew here. It adapted here. It evolved here. From India, they eventually moved east to Indonesia, where we found the Java man, and up to China, where we found the Peking man. These are the names of the fossils. This means that India is the genetic and cultural mother of the entire East. While the West was covered in ice, the Indian subcontinent was a thriving, beating heart of human activity. We weren't on the periphery. Friends, we were the center. So let me take you further. We have the tools in Tamil Nadu. We have the factory in Karnataka. But I know what you are asking. Where are the people? Where are the skeletons? Interestingly, this is the tragedy of Indian archaeology. Our soil is acidic. It eats bones. In the dry cold of Europe, bones last forever. In the wet heat of India, they dissolve. But nature gave us one gift. In 1982, in the Narmada Valley at a place called Hattinora, a geologist named Arun Sonakia, he found something sticking out of the ground. It was a skull cap. It is known as the Narmada man. This is the only physical fossil of an archaic human ever found in India. Now, the skull itself is probably around 250,000 to 500,000 years old. But it sits on layers of sediment that go back millions of years. Some scientists say it's Homo erectus. Others say it is a unique species, Homo narmadensis, a large-brained, robust human ancestor who lived on the banks of Narmada. But look at what he lived with. When archaeologists dig the Narmada Valley, do you know what they found? They found Hexaprotodon. That's a giant prehistoric hippo with 6 incisors. They found Stegodon, a massive elephant with tusks so long they crossed over each other. They found the Bos Namadicus. It's a wild ox that stood 7 feet tall at the shoulder. Now, pause. Open the Puranas. Open the ancient folklore. They describe an era on the earth where gigantic beasts roamed. Remember? They describe forests that were dense and dark. They describe a time when humans lived alongside creatures of immense power. For years, we thought these were metaphors. The Narmada Valley proves they were memories. The Gajamukha, the elephant face, isn't just a random idea. The ancestors of this land lived alongside the Stegodon for a million years. The reverence for the cow isn't just agricultural. It is an ancient evolutionary bond with the Bos Namadicus. The Narmada is considered the oldest river in our tradition, older even than the Ganga. It is said that the Ganga washes away your sins, but merely looking at Narmada purifies you. Why? I think maybe because the memory of this river is the oldest in human history. It is the only witness to the entire drama of human evolution in India. Friends, let me also tell you something that usually gets missed. Life in India wasn't always easy. In fact, the first Indians survived the apocalypse. Let me tell you about that. 74,000 years ago, a supervolcano called Mount Toba erupted in Sumatra, Indonesia. It was the largest volcanic eruption in the last 2 million years. It blocked out the sun. It caused volcanic winter that lasted for years. Ash covered the entire Indian subcontinent. In some places, the ash layer was 6 meters deep. You can still find this ash today in Jwalapuram Valley in Andhra Pradesh. Scientists used to think this eruption wiped everyone out. But you know what? Recent archaeology in India, specifically at Jwalapuram, they found something incredible. They found stone tools under the ash, which means before the explosion, and then they found stone tools above the ash, which was after the explosion. And the style of the tools didn't change. Do you understand what that means? It means the people living in India survived the end of the world. When the sun went dark, when the plants died, when the ash fell like snow, the Indians adapted. They innovated. They held on. This speaks to a resilience, a stubborn will to survive that is baked into our DNA. We are the descendants of the survivors of Toba. But friends, let me tell you about the intersection of science and itihas, history. Let's talk about the Ramayana. The epic describes Prabhu Sri Ram traveling from the north down through the forest of Dandakaranya all the way to the southern tip and crossing the sea to Lanka. Now, skeptics have always asked two questions. How could he walk to Lanka? There is an ocean. And who are the Vanaras? Talking monkeys? They say that's not possible. Okay, let's look at the geology. We know that during the Pleistocene ice ages, which ended about 12,000 years ago, huge amounts of water were locked up in polar ice caps. Sea levels were many meters lower than they are today. During these periods, there was no deep ocean separating India and Sri Lanka. There was a broad land bridge. You could literally walk from Dhanushkodi to Thalaimanar. The tools at Athirampakam, they prove humans were living right on the edge of this route. The path existed. The geography is real. Now, what about the Vanaras? The Ramayana describes them not as simple humans, but as forest dwellers, powerful, using tools, coexisting with humans, but distinct from them. Evolutionary biology tells that Homo sapiens were not alone. We shared this planet with Homo erectus, Homo floresiensis, and the Denisovans. We lived in a world of multiple human-like species. Is the description of the Vanaras a myth? Or is it a cultural memory of a time when different hominoid species coexisted in the Indian forests? When the text says that they had speech and culture but looked different, that fits the biological reality of our cousins in the human family tree. I would say they were as evolved as the humans in those times. They were just a different kind of humans, if I may put it in layman terms. Why? Because being conscious and full of devotion is a human trait and possibility. And what better example of consciousness and devotion can you find other than Lord Hanuman himself? The Ramayana might be preserving the memory of the last days of that coexistence. This is so important to you in Bharat because it changes your identity. We define advanced today by how fast our internet is. But perhaps the Vedic civilization defined advanced by how much you can understand the cosmos without destroying it. The tools at Isampur, they lasted for 1,000,000 years. Our iPhones last 3 years. Who was more civilized? The stones are speaking, friends. And finally, science is catching up to the sages. It is time we rewrote our history books. It is time we took ownership of our deep past. This is Bharat Leads. If this history made you proud, please share this episode. Let the world know. Jai Hind.